Welcome to another edition of the Sales Development Podcast, powered by Tenbound, hosted by David Dulany. My name is James Bawden, here to introduce episode 187 with a fantastic return guest, which doesn't happen very often here on the Sales Development Podcast, Mr. Ron Nelson, account executive at Comparably. This is one of the reasons why I personally love this podcast, because David always brings on people with unique perspectives and unique journeys. And Ron kicks off the episode by sharing his perspective coming up through the SDR ranks into SDR leadership, then going into an account executive role, becoming an individual contributor again, and his mindset on his own career strategy. Again, unique, insightful, amazing start to the podcast. And David has Ron share some tactical and practical career advice for folks in SDR leadership roles that are looking for their next step. What's next? What are you going to do? Ron shares his own journey, which is always helpful. Really practical and tactical stuff here, which is always great. Ron discusses how his thirst for knowledge and willingness to seek out training instead of waiting for his company has helped him stand out throughout the different transitions through his career. Such valuable advice for anybody listening to this episode that wants to take their career to the next level. The episode wraps up with David and Ron talking about the value of 100% focus on your current role. Instead of always searching for the next title or the next position, what happens when you give your all to the current role you're in? Something that David and Ron talk deeply about, because Ron is literally doing that right now and talks about some of the things that he's doing right now to stay focused. Anybody who has ever had a unique career path will love this episode. Anybody who's starting their career and wants to hear a different perspective of what's possible needs to listen to this episode. And as always, leave us a review. Head over to tenbound.com. Enjoy episode 187 with Ron Nelson, account executive at Comparably.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Sales Development Podcast. I am very excited to bring back a return guest. We don't do this very often, so this is a big one. Mr. Ron Nelson is the account executive over at Comparably. Ron, how are you doing today, sir?
I am doing fantastic. Super excited to be back on the podcast. Thanks for the invite.
I know, dude. It's been a couple of years, man. We got to get you on quicker next time. This is interesting because, you know, a lot of sales development reps and managers are, you know, in the midst of doing a career, you know, transition, or they're trying to get to the next level, et cetera, et cetera. They're looking at different career options. And I thought it was interesting because you had come up, you know, through the ranks of sales development, managing teams, running teams, and then went into the account executive position where you're running a book of business and doing sales, you know, as the full cycle sales rep. So now you're not only the SDR, but you're closing deals, taking care of customers, doing everything now. So I'm curious, you know, how did you think about, you know, that change, and what's your overall strategy from a career perspective?
Crazy, right? You don't hear that very often, you know, the career path that I've had. But, you know, I think, you know, starting as an SDR, I always had interest in the AE role. And, you know, where I was at with my career, and I think honestly, like the pandemic sort of was a catalyst for this thought process. You know, you can be in a role and you're good at it and you kind of just, you know, float down that path. And, you know, I looked at my career and I've got a lot of top of funnel expertise. And what I wanted to do was really round myself off and be a complete package as far as like a salesperson, right? And my sales, you know, knowledge. So this was a great opportunity for me to understand and get expertise at bottom funnel activity. And what this is going to do long-term for me is if I do want to get back into managing, I can. And now I have the opportunity to manage AEs, you know, and that pathway could take you towards VP of sales, et cetera. Now, if I find success and really enjoy this role, the unique thing about an AE is they're always sought after if you're good at it, so that door is always open for me, to continue on and be an AE. And that's kind of what started that process. And, happy to talk about the steps I took to get into it. But, at a high level, that was sort of my thought process.
That's interesting. Okay. So tell us about the sales development experience that you had. So were you a SDR at some point and then became a manager? How did you get into that position?
I was really blessed to get into a good opportunity over at Information Builders, years ago. And I started at the organization as an SDR, worked my way up to a team lead, managed a small team on the West Coast. I then took over half of North America. And then I took over the entire sales, program, sales development program. So all of North America, Canada, as well as the 50 states. And where they were at as far as their journey is they were looking to revamp the entire sales development program. So I had an opportunity to basically rebuild it brick by brick, starting with, doing an evaluation on sales engagement platform, other tools, putting in the process of, what is the candidate profile we're looking for? What does the career path look like? Really helping SDRs for a long-term successful career in sales, coaching, ramping them up, helping them to get exposed to the AE role or management role or marketing and moving them in that direction. All of those things, building out the processes as far as, how we engage prospects, what does that look like? Common objection handling, pitches, like everything. I mean, from the ground up.
Total playbook, right?
Yep.
And so
down, outbound, all of it.
I mean, you're running this team. I mean, what were some of the things that you enjoyed about, the sales development leadership process? And then what are some of the things that you're not missing at all, now that you're out of it?
So, I tell you, like when I look at my career to this point, one of the things that I'm most, proud of is the relationships that I've been able to build, on my teams. So, with SDRs, you're typically getting folks that are right out of college and you're helping them to learn how to be a professional, how to run a sales process, business acumen, just all of those things. And what I'm most proud of is those relationships. I mean, to this day, still talking, to former SDRs that are now have become AEs. They're very successful. Some are in managing, some are, sales engineers, and really having to have being able to have an impact on their lives by giving them the foundation that the role of sales development provides, as an SDR. I think the SDR role is phenomenal, a starting point to learn the blocking and the tackling. And these are skill sets that I'm actually currently using in my current role as an account executive. So I'm most proud of that. And that's the thing that I enjoyed the most. And being in a leadership role, you can have a tremendous impact on the team. It could be an incredibly fun and exciting experience. You have that power as a leader to do that, to instill a great attitude in the folks. And we had so much fun, working together, hitting our goals, celebrating those goals, and really learning, in that process, myself and them. I learned, from them as well. The thing that I, enjoy in this role, which is a bit refreshing, which is going to sound a little ironic after what I just said, but it's kind of nice to just be responsible for myself, for like the first time in so many years, my effort, what I put into it, my attitude. I'm the master of that journey. I'm controlling my own destiny. I'm not having to rely on really others, to hit their targets in order for me to hit my targets, and that's refreshing, just the difference.
Big time. And so, does it open you up to be able to really focus on what you're doing? And you have a lot more underneath your control versus you really, as a manager, you're releasing a lot of control to what the activities of others.
Correct.
Yeah. And so you're liking that.
I like that, and it's great because I always try to still be involved in the engagement, even, when I'm over 5, SDR managers and 27, SDRs. I still want to, pick up the phone and I want to scrape off that rust and actually be hands-on from that aspect. But at the end of the day, because you have so many responsibilities, you can't really actively prospect like you would as an SDR or now in an AE. So it's really cool to take those strategies, to take the tactics that I've learned and be actually, using them myself to get my own meetings. I'm having a ton of fun doing that. And it feels good that the things that I taught them, I'm actually seeing that it works, not just by, them executing on it, but I'm executing on it myself.
Yeah, I'm curious about that. I mean, a lot of skills translate over from, your experience that you're bringing in. And so let's talk about that. I mean, obviously the prospecting, right? Everything that you learned, you're now implementing for yourself.
Yeah. So, what's unique about me is being in sort of an executive leadership role at Information Builders. I had an opportunity to, sit in on over 500 QBRs and listen to all the complaints and the pitfalls about AEs. And these QBRs were 3 hours long apiece, just dissecting territories, pipeline, whatever. Every VP that I've ever worked with, your typical sales manager, they have, common complaints. And so it's usually a lack of number of ops, a lack of pipeline, account executives being single threaded and unable to connect with other key stakeholders, poor qualification. If you really think about it, those are all things that we do as prospectors, and that's what's really, I think, allowed me to hit the ground running in this role is that I know how to engage and get meetings and get ops and qualify, ops and drive pipeline. I've been doing that for a long time, managing teams who are responsible for that. And now I have an opportunity to do that myself. Ton of overlap there. And that's a big part of what an account executive does. And then, of course, you have internal resources that help you with some of the other aspects of the sale, to get it across the line. But, I think that, and I forget who was that. I think it was Lars Nielsen. He made a statement one time, the hardest thing about, winning a deal is finding the deal. So I think that that skill set that I learned, in sales development is really helping me out in this role now.
That's huge. And I wanted to ask you now, from the other side, from the flip side of the table, now, are you working with SDRs and, how do you bring your experience in making that relationship work?
So we have a team of SDRs. They're fantastic. We're not assigned a one-on-one, kind of a situation. The leads that we get, from SDRs are round robin. But we do have a lot of interaction. They're very involved in, some of our sales meetings. And the culture of the organization that I'm currently at, they really believe in the sales development function, and they have a pathway for SDRs to become AEs. So they involve them early and often in the process. And because I have the background that I have, I'll take calls with SDRs, new ones that, onboard, talk about the role with them. I've talked to some of the more tenured SDRs about, what their process is like. And then, I'm able to contribute to that. Although we've got some great SDRs and they've got a great process, but, just kind of the main thing that I think where I've been able to connect with them is just telling them what my story was and starting out as an AE and how important it is to really master that skill set, to be patient, really learn that skill set because it is the foundation for a really, a great sales career. You're always going to leverage the blocking and the tackling, the prospecting, and that really energizes them.
Big time. So let me ask you this. A lot of the people that listen to this are SDR managers and they're going, what's next, for my career? Where do I take this? Because you're kind of at a crossroads, right? Between all these different paths. You could go into sales, you could get into marketing, you could totally pivot into something completely different, because this could be a path that they didn't really think of, what advice would you have for somebody who's like looking for their next step and they're trying to figure out maybe this is what I should be doing?
So I'll tell you some things that the sitting in on the QBRs was sort of unique to me. But, if you're an SDR or you're an SDR manager and you're considering the AE role, like here's some actionable steps that you can take. So first and foremost, like look at job posts and identify the skills that companies value in an AE. Talk to AEs at your current company. Even find somebody that you can meet on a regular basis so you can start to talk, through skills that AE feels are important for them to be successful in the role. Talk through as many deal cycles as possible. Learn the steps of closing a deal. Get familiar with that. Talk through the wins and, what was key to them winning that deal. Talk through the losses, the pitfalls, lessons that they've learned, what they would have done differently. Once you identify that skill set, you can start that process to really kind of develop it right now, regardless of what role you're in. There's a ton of information out there, like sign up for blogs, attend webinars, join LinkedIn groups, get that information. Reach out to AEs outside of the organization. I listen to a lot of podcasts. You're going to find successful AEs on the podcast. Look them up on LinkedIn. Use that prospecting knowledge to reach out to them and set up a meeting so that you can, get more information. You'd be surprised at, how many people are willing to help. Ask if you can sit in on a QBR if you're not already sitting in on a QBR. There's a lot to learn there. There's books, there's blogs. If you're using a software like a Gong, you can listen to calls at night, on the weekends. There's just a ton of ways that you can get exposure to the role and be able to make an intelligent decision about, whether or not that is, a good role for you. And then by doing all of those things, when you get into that interview situation, you can articulate the steps that you've done to be able to have a successful career as an AE. And the recruiter is going to appreciate that, or whoever you're speaking with, the hiring manager, because a lot of AEs don't do the things that I've just outlined,
Totally. And so you've got a learner mentality. So it seems like you go out of your way. And I mean, I met you at the Tenbound conference, right? I mean, isn't that where we met initially, or was it online? I can't remember, but I know that you're always searching and, this is just the next progressive step.
Yeah, even as a sales development rep, I mean, whatever role you're in, the way to differentiate yourself is by getting this outside knowledge. Don't wait for your company to train you. It's great if they have a culture of training and learning and, people who want to coach you, but don't rely on that. And we met at the sales development conference. I was there specifically to learn, to advance my career, to differentiate myself. Be willing to do things that others aren't willing to do, that extra time investment. I'm an avid follower of the podcast, sales development. I still listen to it because that's how much I value that skill set in terms of prospecting as, an AE. That I think for me has been what's helped me, to be successful in the roles that I've had, is acquiring this extra outside knowledge.
100%. And now you're leveraging it. So what's next for you? I mean, if you, I know that you just got into this, so you're really enjoying this, and you're, basically beginner's mind. You're back, exploring this new state. Have you thought about how you kind of combine your experience looking forward? Is sales going to be the next thing? Is it, something like that, or how do you think of it in that way?
Because I'm new into the role, and it's kind of similar advice I give, an SDR. It's like, you want to, think and map out, your next moves. But, right now, my main goal is to master this role, crush my quota, quarter in and quarter out. And, that's where I'm focused at right now, being the best AE that I possibly can. And once I have proven to myself and have established a track record, then that's where I can take action on my next steps, and I think that if I want to get back into management, and lead teams, I want to be able to look them in the face and tell them that I've done the exact same role that they're doing at a very high level, and really earn their trust and respect, by what I've done, in that role. So that's the foundation. That's where it starts, is just mastering this role. And then down the road, if I get that itch to lead and manage and coach, then I'll definitely do it. I can do that to a certain extent now because we have a culture where, even though we're competitive, we want to help each other, right? So things that are working for me, things that are working for other account executives, we talk about that on a regular basis to help one another out to be successful. So even though you may not have that leadership title, you can still lead in your role, if that makes sense.
Oh, 100%. I mean, that's really spoken like a true leader, right? To inspire people. And I think, you can tell that you've been a SDR leader for a long time because a lot of people come to you probably over the years and say, I want to get promoted. Like, I want to get to my next thing. You're like, wait a minute, dude. Like, hang on.
Yeah.
Let's focus in and, really master this position, knock it out of the park, show consistency, and the rest takes care of itself, So I could see the future that, that's the winning attitude for sure, So
yeah, like people are short-minded sometimes, and I don't want to be that way. And I always encourage SDRs not to either, because everybody's very focused on the moment that they get that title, they get that role. But, that's not the end. That's just the beginning. And you don't want to just get that title or that job or that new role. The idea is to be successful in it. So make sure that you're ready, and that's what I'm trying to do, now as an AE, master this role before I take on anything else.
I love it. I love it. And do you think they're going to ask you to be the SDR leader again? They're like, hey, Ron knows how to do it. No, I don't know if they already have one.
They've got one.
Okay.
He's doing a fantastic job. We've got an amazing SDR team. And I'm happy to kind of contribute, from where I'm at right now, and he welcomes that, right? So anytime an SDR, comes on board, I usually, set up time with them, talk with them, and I certainly make myself accessible as a resource, if they have any questions, want a different perspective, that kind of thing.
Amazing. Ron, thank you so much for coming on, sharing your knowledge. I'm sure that, there's people with a whole notebook and notes now because they're trying to figure out, hey, how do I do this? So, dude, this is great. If folks want to connect with you, what's the best way to make sure that we stay in touch?
Please do. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way. Ron Nelson, account executive at Comparably. I'm happy to help, and I've been down that journey, going from SDR to SDR leader. Now I'm going from SDR leader to account executive. So I've learned a ton, I've stepped on my toes and, had to learn from my mistakes, and happy to share that information with others so that they can avoid those pitfalls.
That's awesome, man. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. And we'll get you on for round 3 here in a little while.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Sales Development Podcast, the only audio forum 100% focused and dedicated to sales development, with your host, David Dulany. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on YouTube and take a moment to leave us a review on iTunes. Your support makes our show possible. If you are struggling with your sales development program, contact us at tenbound.com for a no-obligation exploratory call. Again, that's tenbound.com.